The day of my sister Emily's wedding, my parents shoved a black waiter jacket into my hands and told me it was the only way I'd be allowed inside the venue. "You want to be part of this family, Finn, earn it like everyone else," my father growled, while my mother looked away as if the sight of me burned her eyes. I stood there in the back hallway of the sprawling Illinois estate, clutching the stiff fabric, my throat tight with the familiar burn of shame I had carried since the night I came out 3 years ago. At 28, I thought I had built a life far enough from this small-town judgment, working as a graphic designer in Chicago, dating when I felt safe enough to breathe. Yet here I was back in the place that still treated my truth like a stain on the family name. I pulled the jacket on over my white shirt, smoothed the bow tie, and stepped into the bright sunlight of the garden, where 300 guests in pastel dresses and crisp suits chatted under string lights. The scent of fresh-cut roses and grilled steak floated on the warm June air, but it did nothing to loosen the knot in my chest. I picked up a silver tray of champagne flutes and began weaving through the crowd, smiling the way service workers do when they're really screaming inside. An aunt I hadn't seen since high school patted my shoulder and whispered, "So nice of you to help out, dear," as if I had volunteered instead of being blackmailed into it. My cousin laughed too loud when he recognized me. "Finn, the family bartender now, huh?" And I just nodded, because what else could I say? Every step reminded me I was the gay son, the one who ruined Christmas 3 years ago, when I finally spoke the words that made my father slam the door and my mother cry for weeks. I kept my eyes down, refilling glasses, clearing plates, until the string quartet signaled the ceremony was about to start. Guests settled into white chairs facing the flower-covered altar, where my sister Emily stood radiant in her lace gown, her veil catching the sunlight like something out of a movie. The groom Ryan looked proud beside her, but my gaze kept drifting to the best man, standing tall in a navy suit, dark hair, neatly styled, jaw sharp enough to cut glass. Nathaniel. My breath caught so hard I nearly dropped the tray. He was here. The man I had loved and lost in Chicago 2 years ago because I was too scared to bring him home, too terrified of exactly this moment. Our eyes met across the sea of guests for one electric second, and I saw the same shock flicker across his face before he looked away. The officiant began the vows, and I backed toward the edge of the crowd, praying I could disappear. Then Emily's voice rang out clear and steady, cutting through the vows. "Before I say I do, there's someone I need up here." She turned her bouquet toward the guests and pointed straight at me. "Finn, come here, please." 300 heads swiveled. The garden went dead silent except for the distant hum of bees. My tray trembled in my hands. I stood frozen as every eye in the place burned into me, the gay waiter, the family embarrassment, now being summoned by the bride herself in front of God and everyone. Nathaniel's gaze locked on mine again, this time filled with something I couldn't name. My father's face turned purple from the front row. And I realized with a sick twist in my gut that the real wedding hadn't even started yet. I walked forward, legs numb, the tray still in my hands because I hadn't thought to set it down. Every step felt like crossing a minefield. Emily's smile was soft, but her eyes held a determination I hadn't seen since we were kids, plotting to sneak out past curfew. When I reached the altar, she took my free hand and squeezed it once hard enough to steady me. "This is my brother Finn," she said, voice carrying across the garden without a microphone. "And today he's not just serving champagne. He's standing with me because family means showing up even when it's hard." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked ready to explode. I wanted the grass to swallow me whole, but Emily kept holding on, refusing to let go. Nathaniel watched from his spot beside Ryan, his expression unreadable yet somehow anchoring. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly, but Emily wasn't finished. "Finn has spent years carrying our family's silence, and today I'm done with silence." She turned to me, eyes shining. "Thank you for being here even when we didn't make it easy." The applause started hesitant at first, then stronger from the younger guests in the back rows. I managed a nod, throat too tight for words, and somehow found my way back to the edge of the crowd, still clutching that ridiculous tray. The ceremony continued, but the air had changed. I could feel the weight of stares, the whispers, the judgment shifting into something else, curiosity, maybe even respect from a few. When the kiss sealed the vows and cheers erupted, I slipped behind the catering tent, needing air. My hands shook so badly I set the tray on a table and pressed my palms against the canvas. Footsteps approached. I knew who it was before I turned. Nathaniel stood their hands in his pockets, the same steady presence that had once made me believe I could face anything. "Finn," he said quietly, voice carrying the same low warmth that used to wrap around me like a blanket on cold Chicago nights. "You okay?" I laughed, once bitter and short. "Define okay. My sister just outed me to the entire family in the middle of her wedding, and I'm still wearing this stupid jacket." He stepped closer, eyes searching mine the way they always had when he wanted the truth beneath the sarcasm. "She did it for you. I talked to her last night after Ryan introduced us. She knew I knew you." The confession hung between us, heavy with everything we had left unsaid 2 years ago. I had ended things because bringing Nathaniel home meant risking exactly the explosion I had spent my life dodging. Now here he was, best man at my sister's wedding, and the secret I had guarded so carefully was spilling into daylight. "You didn't have to come back," I whispered. Nathaniel's smile was small and sad. "I never really left you, Finn. Not where it counts." Before I could answer, my father's voice cut through the tent flap. "Finn, we need to talk. Now." The afternoon sun suddenly felt too bright, the garden too loud, and the next chapter of my life already spinning out of control. My father's grip on my arm was iron as he pulled me behind the estate's stone wall, away from the reception music and clinking glasses. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, voice low but shaking with rage. "You and your sister turning my daughter's wedding into some kind of announcement?" I yanked free, rubbing the spot where his fingers had dug in. "I didn't ask for it, Dad. Emily made her own choice." He laughed, a harsh sound that carried no humor. "Choice? That's rich coming from you. You chose this lifestyle, and now you're dragging the whole family through it." The word lifestyle landed like a slap, the same one he had used the night I came out. I had rehearsed 1,000 calm responses in therapy, but standing here in the shadow of the house I grew up in, every word evaporated. Nathaniel appeared at the edge of the wall, not close enough to interrupt, but close enough that I felt his presence like a lifeline. My father noticed, and his face twisted. "This the reason you're still single, Finn? Bringing your friend around?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting me lead. I straightened my ridiculous waiter jacket and met my father's eyes. "Nathaniel is my ex. And he's a better man than I've ever been at standing up for what matters." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. My father stared for a long second, then turned and walked away without another word. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Nathaniel stepped forward, voice gentle. "You didn't have to say that." "Yeah, I did," I answered. 3 years of pretending, and I'm tired, Finn. Tired of shrinking myself so they feel comfortable." We walked back toward the reception together, not touching but close enough that our shoulders brushed once. The party had shifted into full swing. Guests danced under fairy lights, Emily and Ryan laughing in the center of the floor. I shed the waiter jacket behind the bar and accepted a real glass of champagne from the actual bartender, who winked like we shared a secret. Emily found me during the first slow song, pulling me onto the floor despite my protests. "You're dancing with your sister at her wedding," she said softly as we swayed. "No arguments." Her head rested against my shoulder the way it had when we were kids hiding from thunderstorms. "I'm sorry it took me this long, Finn. Mom and Dad, they're scared. But I'm not. I love you exactly as you are." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to break in front of everyone. Across the dance floor, Nathaniel watched us, his expression soft and proud. Later, when the cake had been cut and the guests thinned, I found him by the fountain at the edge of the garden. Fireflies blinked in the warm night air. "Walk with me?" he asked. We wandered the gravel path past the rose bushes until the music faded to a distant hum. "I moved to Chicago for a job 2 months after we split," he said finally. "Kept hoping I'd run into you at that coffee shop on Michigan Avenue." I smiled, remembering the place where we used to steal kisses behind the pastry case. "I stopped going after you left. Too many ghosts." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "I never stopped loving you, Finn. Even when you pushed me away because you were scared of this exact weekend." The honesty cracked something open inside me. I reached for his hand and he let me take it, fingers warm and steady. "I was scared," I admitted. "Still am. But Emily forcing me front and center today, it felt like permission to stop hiding." We stood like that under the stars talking until the reception lights dimmed and the last cars pulled away. When we finally headed back to the main house, my mother waited on the porch steps, her face pale in the porch light. "Your father went to bed," she said quietly. "But I want you to know I heard what Emily said. And I'm trying, Finn. I really am." It wasn't an apology, but it was more than she had ever given me. I nodded, too exhausted for more, and watched her disappear inside. Nathaniel squeezed my hand once before letting go. "Tomorrow's another day," he whispered. I didn't know then how right he was or how many more explosions tomorrow would bring. Morning light poured through the lace curtains of my childhood bedroom, painting stripes across the old baseball trophies I had never bothered to pack. I woke to the smell of coffee and the low murmur of voices downstairs. Nathaniel had crashed on the couch in the den after the reception, promising to drive back to Chicago with me later. I pulled on jeans and a hoodie and padded downstairs, expecting the usual awkward silence. Instead, I found Emily at the kitchen table, still in her robe, hair twisted up messily, her new husband Ryan flipping pancakes at the stove. Nathaniel sat across from my sister, cradling a mug like it was a lifeline. "Morning, hero," Emily teased when she saw me. "Dad already left for the golf course. Mom's in the garden pretending the hydrangeas need saving." I poured coffee and joined them, the weight of yesterday's events settling heavy on my shoulders. Ryan slid a plate in front of me and clapped my back. "You two looked good out there last night," he said, nodding toward Nathaniel. "Emily told me everything. Glad you're both here." The easy acceptance from my new brother-in-law felt foreign but welcome. Nathaniel's knee brushed mine under the table, a silent reminder we weren't alone. Then my mother walked in carrying a basket of fresh-cut flowers, her eyes red-rimmed. She set the basket down and looked straight at me. "I called your Aunt Margaret last night. Told her the truth. All of it." Her voice cracked. "She said she always suspected and that she loves you anyway." The admission hung in the air, fragile as glass. I didn't know what to say, so I stood and hugged her for the first time in years. She held on longer than I expected. Emily wiped her eyes and laughed wetly. "See? One wedding, one miracle. But miracles rarely last." By noon, my father returned from golf, his face thunderous. He found us in the living room and dropped the bomb without preamble. "The family trust. The one Grandpa set up for all the grandkids. I talked to the lawyer this morning. There's a morality clause. Your lifestyle, Finn, it's complicated things." Nathaniel stiffened beside me. Emily shot to her feet. "Dad, you can't be serious." "I'm protecting the family," he snapped. Finn made his choices. Now he lives with them. The room exploded. Accusations flew. Ryan tried to mediate, but my father's voice rose until it cracked like a whip. "You want to parade your boyfriend at my daughter's wedding, fine. But don't expect the rest of us to pay for it." Nathaniel stood slowly, his height imposing in the small room. "With all due respect, Sir, Finn doesn't need your money. He has a life in Chicago. A good one. And he has me." The declaration landed like a stone in still water. My father stared at him, then at me. "Get out. Both of you. Now." The words I had feared for years finally spoken. I felt the floor tilt, but Nathaniel's hand found the small of my back, steadying me. We packed in silence. Emily cried as she hugged me at the door, whispering, "I'll fix this. I swear." My mother pressed a small envelope into my hand. "Your grandfather's watch. He wanted you to have it." I climbed into Nathaniel's rental car, heart hammering. As we pulled down the long driveway, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror and felt something inside me shift. Not broken. Just different. Nathaniel reached over and laced our fingers together. "Chicago's waiting," he said softly. "And so am I. For real this time." The highway stretched ahead, carrying us away from everything I had known and toward everything I had been too afraid to claim. Chicago greeted us with its familiar roar of traffic and the sharp tang of lake wind as we crossed the skyway. Nathaniel's apartment in Wicker Park felt like stepping into a different life, clean lines, modern art on the walls, and the faint scent of his cologne that still made my pulse jump. We dropped our bags and stood in the living room, suddenly awkward like teenagers on a first date. "You can take the bedroom," he offered. I'll crash on the couch. I shook my head. We've done enough hiding, Nathaniel. I'm not sleeping alone tonight. His smile was slow and real, the first one I had seen since the wedding. We ordered Thai food and talked until the city lights blurred outside the windows. He told me about the promotion he had turned down to stay closer to family after his mom's cancer scare. I told him about the freelance gigs that kept me afloat and the nights I had stared at my phone wanting to call him. When the food was gone and the conversation lulled, he pulled me onto the couch and kissed me the way he used to, slow and deep, like he had all the time in the world. It wasn't about heat, it was about home. The next weeks blurred into a rhythm I had forgotten existed. Mornings with coffee on the fire, escape evenings, cooking together, weekends exploring neighborhoods I had avoided because they reminded me of him. At work, my boss noticed the change. "You look lighter, Finn," she said one afternoon, handing me a new client brief. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." I laughed and realized she was right. The weight I had carried from Illinois was lifting. But family doesn't let go that easily. Emily called every few days, updating me on the trust situation. "Dad's digging in," she admitted one night, voice tired. "But Mom's been reading books about PFLAG. Baby steps." Nathaniel listened to every call, rubbing circles on my back when my voice cracked. Then came the text that changed everything. My cousin Jake, the one who had laughed at me at the wedding, sent a message with a photo attached. It was my father at the country club shaking hands with a lawyer. The caption read, "He's really doing it, Finn. Contest the trust. Says it's for the family name." I stared at the screen until Nathaniel gently took the phone from my hands. "We fight it," he said simply. "Together." The next day we met with a lawyer downtown, a sharp woman named Carla who specialized in estate and LGBTQ cases. She listened to the whole story without flinching, then leaned forward. "Morality clauses like this rarely hold up anymore, especially in Illinois. But it'll be ugly. Depositions, family testimony, the works." I looked at Nathaniel across the conference table and saw the same resolve in his eyes that had carried me through the wedding. "Do it," I said. The fight became our new normal. Court dates, depositions, late-night strategy sessions. Through it all, Nathaniel never wavered. He held me when nightmares of my father's voice woke me. He celebrated the small wins, like when Emily testified on my behalf. One evening after a particularly brutal hearing, we walked along the lakefront, the city skyline glowing behind us. "I almost lost you once because I was scared of this exact fight," I admitted, stopping to face him. "I'm not scared anymore." Nathaniel cupped my face, thumbs brushing my cheeks. "Then let's build something they can't touch." We kissed there with the waves lapping and the wind whipping around us, and for the first time I believed we could. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Carla on one side and Nathaniel on the other, his hand resting lightly on my knee under the table where no one could see. My father sat across the aisle, jaw set, refusing to meet my eyes. Emily had flown in that morning and now perched in the gallery beside my mother, who twisted a tissue in her lap. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, called the session to order and the arguments began. Carla laid out the case with surgical precision, citing changing societal standards, Illinois law, and the emotional harm caused by the clause. My father's lawyer countered with tradition and Grandpa's original intent. I was called to testify first. Standing in the witness box, I felt every eye in the room, but Nathaniel's steady gaze anchored me. I spoke about the years of silence, the forced distance, the love I had lost because I believed their rejection defined me. When I mentioned Nathaniel's name, my voice didn't waver. "He showed me I could be both gay and worthy of family," I said. "Not the one I was born into maybe, but the one I choose." Cross-examination was brutal. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as ungrateful, rebellious. I answered every question with quiet truth until the judge called a recess. In the hallway, Emily hugged me hard. "You were incredible," she whispered. My mother approached hesitantly. "I voted against your father on the trust board last week," she said so quietly I almost missed it. "I told him it wasn't right." The admission cracked the last wall inside me. I pulled her into a hug right there in the marble hallway, while Nathaniel watched with a soft smile. The final day of testimony brought Nathaniel to the stand. He spoke about our history, the breakup, the reunion at the wedding, and the life we were building. Finn doesn't need the money, he said, looking straight at my father. But he needs to know his family sees him. Really sees him. When court adjourned that afternoon, the judge promised a ruling within 30 days. We walked out into the October sunlight, Nathaniel's arm around my shoulders. Whatever happens, he said, we're okay. Back in the apartment, we celebrated the small victory of surviving with takeout and a bottle of wine. Later, tangled in sheets with city lights flickering through the blinds, I traced the line of his jaw and whispered, "Thank you for standing with me." He kissed my forehead. Always. The weeks that followed tested us. Waiting is its own kind of war. I threw myself into work, finishing a major campaign that earned me a promotion. Nathaniel took a new role at his firm, one that let him work remotely, so we could travel to small towns on weekends, exploring places where no one knew our story. Emily sent updates, my mother joined a support group, and even my father's silence began to feel less like rejection and more like uncertainty. Then the envelope arrived. I opened it at the kitchen counter, hands shaking as Nathaniel read over my shoulder. The judge had ruled. The morality clause was struck down. The trust would be distributed equally, including my share. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Nathaniel hooped and spun me around the kitchen, laughing until we both collapsed onto the couch, breathless and giddy. That night, we called Emily on speakerphone. She cried happy tears and promised to bring Ryan for Thanksgiving. "Dad's quiet," she said, "but Mom says he read the ruling twice. Give him time." I hung up and turned to Nathaniel. "We did it," I said. He pulled me close. "You did it, Finn. You stood up and the world adjusted." The relief felt like sunrise after the longest night. Thanksgiving arrived with crisp air and the scent of roasting turkey filling Nathaniel's apartment. We had invited a small circle: Emily and Ryan, my mother, who had flown up alone, and a few close friends from Chicago. The table was crowded with laughter and clinking forks. My mother sat beside Nathaniel, passing him the stuffing with a tentative smile. "You make him happy," she said quietly when the others were distracted. "That's enough for me now." Nathaniel squeezed her hand once, and the gesture nearly undid me. Emily raised a glass midway through the meal. "To family," she said. "The one we're born with and the one we build." Everyone toasted, and for the first time the word family didn't feel like a cage. Later, when the pie plates were empty and the guests had drifted into the living room, my mother pulled me aside on the small balcony overlooking the twinkling city. "Your father didn't come," she said, "but he sent this." She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper in his handwriting. I was wrong about a lot of things. The money was never the point. I'm still learning. "Happy Thanksgiving, son." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Tears stung, but I smiled. "Tell him thank you," I said. "And that the door's open when he's ready." She hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that carried years of unsaid words. Nathaniel joined us after she went inside, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay," I answered, leaning back into him. "I'm home." The next morning we walked along the lake hand in hand, watching the sun rise over the water. Nathaniel stopped and turned to me, eyes serious in the golden light. "I've been thinking," he said, "about forever. Not just today or next year. I want a life with you, Finn. Marriage, kids, maybe a house with a yard. All of it." My heart swelled so full I thought it might burst. "Yes," I whispered before he could say more. "To all of it." We kissed there, with the city waking up around us and the future stretching bright and wide. Months later, on a quiet spring afternoon in the same garden where Emily had called my name, we held our own small ceremony. Only close friends and family attended this time. My father sat in the second row beside my mother, his posture stiff but his eyes clear. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, he remained silent and later shook Nathaniel's hand with a gruff, "Take care of him." It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. As we danced under the same string lights where everything had begun, I looked at the man who had stood beside me through every storm and felt the last piece of my old self settle into place. The boy who had hidden in waiter jackets was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned that love wasn't something to earn, it was something to claim. True or false? Family acceptance is the only thing that matters in the end?